Hi, everybody. I am Rhonda Henry. I'm one of the therapists at the Office of Work Life here on campus, and I provide services to faculty and staff on campus. I'm here today to talk a little bit about creating a resilient mindset, and I'm excited to have been invited to join in with our partners over in Health and Wellness to do this. I'll talk a little bit at the end about our services and how you can access that, and we'll answer questions at the end as well. Feel free to go ahead and put those in the chat box if you like, if questions come up as we're talking. But I'll save all of those till the end so that we can sort of streamline this a little more efficiently. All right, so let's get started. This is one of my favorite quotes. I'm not what happened to me, I'm what I choose to become. So let me give you just a minute of background about why resilience is an issue or a topic that I've been fascinated with for a long, long time. I've spent about 23 years working in trauma care. And so I was helping folks who have experienced partner abuse, sexual assault. I was the director of the Rape Crisis Center for a long time, stalking, crime victimization. And as you can imagine, that can take a toll after a little while. And so I would often hear from folks, how do you do that work? How do you work with people that have been hurt? And you hear these stories of hurt and pain over and over. And what I found was being able to see the resilience in the folks that I was serving. That's what filled me up. Being able to see folks go through circumstances and situations that most of us can't fathom, but that they were still able to find some peace in that where they could regain control, or where they could look at what possibilities were ahead for them and not just get stuck in what they had experienced. For me, that's what I took home with me at the end of each night. And seeing that resilience, seeing the difference in how it impacted people's healing, how they were able to navigate and process what they had been through and really experience a different resolution to it, that to me was so incredibly powerful. And what I realized over time was I was building my own resilience by looking at things that way. If I had focused in on the negatives and the pain that people had been through, I would have been burnt out really quick and I wouldn't have been able to do that. But by looking at that resilience, I myself was doing the same thing. So I'm really glad that we're talking about this topic. And I give that example to say, we all are going to have life challenges. We're all going to have aging parents or parenting issues, work challenges, health challenges of our own, chronic pain. All of those things, we don't know what's going to come into our lives, but how we respond to it, that's the good stuff. That's the magic of where we've got some control. So let's go into this next one. Why does resiliency matter? Resiliency, kind of in a nutshell, is this ability to persevere, to adapt, and to bounce back when we have difficult situations. It is not saying that we don't struggle, that we don't feel pain, that we don't get lost a little bit in that process. But it's that ability to push through and to find ways to persevere, to adapt, and then to bounce back. Resilience helps us survive and cope and feel in control even during those difficult times. Again, pain is unavoidable, difficulties are unavoidable. How we respond to them, that's where our control is. So what I want us to focus in on this time, and knowing that we have a limited amount of time, we could certainly talk about this topic for days. But for today and the amount of time we have, I want to focus in on these 3 C's of resiliency and how these different components kind of fit together. So the first one is commitment. So in the commitment piece, it is this idea of committing to a goal regardless of what obstacles may arise. And I think one of the easiest sort of examples that most of us have dealt with is when we're in school. If we're pursuing a degree or a certification, that sort of thing, we know that's going to be challenging. We know it's going to take time and attention and money and sacrifice of other things in our lives. But we've got our eye on that goal, and so we're working toward this. We've got that commitment and knowing even if obstacles come up, I'm going to try to find a way to push through this. The next piece being control. And control is a tricky thing. None of us want to be controlling. Much of our anxiety, sometimes our depression, can come from trying to control things that we have no ability to control. How many of us have tried to change someone else's behavior or control circumstances at work that aren't ours to make a difference to, and then feel that frustration when we can't do that, or that feeling of impotence that what I'm doing isn't mattering. Sometimes depending on circumstances, the only thing we might be able to control is our reaction to the circumstances and what's going on. And I know that sometimes that can feel really small. I want to change the entire thing that's going on. I don't want to just control my response to it. But that's all I've got the ability to change. And then the third one being challenge. Viewing potentially stressful events as a challenge instead of a threat. And I think, again, I make that connection with depression and anxiety especially, I think can really be impacted in this, where we sometimes perceive the threat that's coming up or the challenge that's there as so overwhelming, and that we don't have any ability to do anything with that. We often underestimate our skill set to deal with these things, our ability to step up to the plate or to navigate this or to find skills to deal with it. And I think often if we see that challenge and think of it as being too big, if the threat feels too much and we think our skills are too low, then we can really get stuck in a place of feeling very anxious or depressed about the fact that we're not able to make that impact the way we want it to be. So I think these three components really tie into building resiliency. So then comes the question, what if I'm not resilient? What if that's just not me? And to stay resilient, I have to take a drink of water from time to time. So I think, to me, this is one of the really exciting parts, is that resiliency is not a trait that you're either born with or not. You either have or you don't. It involves behaviors, thoughts, and actions that can be learned and developed in anybody. For me, and in the kind of field that I'm in, that is exciting stuff, because what that says to me is my brain can change. I can change automatic thoughts. I can change how I link together when something negative is happening. What do I go to with that? How do I deal with it, and how do I respond? And just the fact that I've always responded a certain way does not mean that that's the roadmap for how I need to respond and will respond in future situations. That neuroplasticity, the fact that our brain can change and that we can shift what connections are made, what automatic thoughts are happening. I remember years ago seeing some of the brain scans of folks that were in talk therapy, and seeing the differences after therapy of areas in their brain that are lighting up and connections that are being made. For me, that is golden, and that's what I'm hoping to sort of convey to other folks as well, is that we are not just as we are. We've got the ability to make change. Now, is it instant and easy? No. It's going to take time and practice and learning some skills and doing things differently and challenging old patterns, but it can be done. And that, again, to me is golden. So let's talk a little bit about how we do that and how this sort of fits together with this idea of growth and fixed mindsets. So some of you may be familiar with these terms or may have heard these used in other ways. This comes up a whole lot in education. So as you can imagine, on campus, we talk about this quite a bit. So that idea of a growth mindset, that is a mindset where I'm saying to myself, challenges are good. I can learn from constructive feedback. Failure is an opportunity to grow. Now, that doesn't mean that I have to like failure, okay, because I don't. I can tell you this right now. But if I have failure, if I have a stumbling time, then what I want to sort of set up in myself is, I want my first question to be, what can I learn from this? How do I take this experience that was hard and painful and difficult, and how do I translate that into something that's better? And how do I grow with that? And whether that's individually or at work or in my family, whatever those circumstances might be. It's also just kind of a general thought of, I like trying new things. I want more. It's this idea of my mind is expanding, and I want that growth because I want to put myself in a position to learn and grow and develop, because we don't stop that. We talk about developmental stages for children, but we don't sometimes think about the fact that as adults, we are continuing to grow, or at least if we want to be healthy, good functioning adults, we want to continue to grow. The other sort of flip of that is the idea of a fixed mindset. And so in a fixed mindset, where thoughts are more in the vein of, I am who I am. I'm just not good at math. I'm just, failure is showing me the limits of my abilities. That's as good as I can get. Now, when I say, because I am definitely someone who would have said, I am not good at math. That is not my strong suit. That's not the field I went into. But what we can do when we want to shift that a little bit is, instead of saying, I'm not good at math, I might say, math doesn't come easily to me. Math is something I have to work at really hard. Even when I study, in those classes, I may not do as well as I do in some other classes, but boy, I'm willing to put that effort in. So that's, again, just a really simple example of how we can switch some of that, because those thoughts and those things we're saying to ourselves, that becomes our identity. That becomes how we see ourselves and how we sort of introduce ourselves to others in the world. So looking at those two differences and knowing we may be more naturally drawn to one or the other, but that does not mean that we are predestined to stay within one or the other. Here's a little bit more around that fixed and growth mindset. So again, we look at, and this example kind of focuses in on intelligence in particular, but a lot of this comes up around education. But again, looking at that growth mindset piece, embracing the challenges, independent learning, persistence when we see obstacles, seeing effort as the path to mastery. Okay, I'm going to talk about that one for just a second. I think that one to me really speaks to me because it focuses more on the process as opposed to just the end result. Often folks who I see in individual counseling, I will talk to them and use this example that sometimes feels silly, but it certainly tends to work. I look at change we're trying to make, and I encourage them to think of it in terms of being a pilot project. We do pilot projects all the time around this university. We have an idea for something, we get our best thoughts together, we get people involved, we make a plan, and then we kind of make a plan to roll it out. And then what do? We don't just stop there. If it doesn't work, we don't just go, well, that's the end of all of that. No, we come back together. We come back, we check in, what worked, what didn't work, what do we need to adjust? And I think we do that in external projects much more easily. I think we don't give ourselves that same grace to realize that, I got to figure out what works for me and how do I develop these things? And part of that is learning from the process itself and not just that end result. So it's that culture of curiosity. Learning from constructive criticism, being inspired by other successes, not seeing successes of other folks as a threat, but seeing that as an inspiration. And then again, that fixed mindset, and of course I wish these two were in the opposite order there, but it leads to that avoidance of challenges, giving up when you're faced with obstacles, seeing effort as fruitless, and it gets very focused on, did I succeed or fail, as opposed to looking at learning and growth opportunities. So let's look for a minute. So when we look at this piece, what I want to do is connect this back to those 3 C's. Remember, we were talking about those a few minutes ago. So when we look at these 3 C's, I'm going to give you a minute to read through that again. I think it's a really natural intersection to look at how that fixed and growth mindset intersect with this part of resiliency. So let's go back through them. So when we talk about commitment, committing to a goal regardless of what obstacles may arise. So again, in that fixed mindset, I know what I know, I'm good at what I'm good at, this is it, I'm sticking to this part, versus the growth mindset of the process is part of the learning, that I can get inspired by others, that failure is an opportunity to do it differently. When we look at control, believing we have some influence over the outcome of events. Again, if I feel like I'm completely helpless, that's much more in that fixed mindset world. I'm helpless, things are what they are, there's nothing I can do to change that. And no, I may not be able to change all circumstances, but somewhere in there, there's some stuff I can control. And if nothing else, I can control me, how I think about things, how I respond to them, what I focus on, how I take care of myself in the midst of adversity. And then this challenge piece. So looking at a potential or viewing a potentially stressful event as a challenge instead of a threat. That is growth mindset all day long, okay? What are the opportunities? How do I learn and grow more? Sometimes that's going to mean failure. Sometimes it's going to mean that I don't get out of some automatic thoughts, but it means that even when those things come up, I'm willing to push through that and I'm willing to try to learn new ways to cope with that. So just some kind of basic takeaways from this. The idea that change in mindset is possible, that our brain is not in this fixed space of it is what it is, that's all. We can make significant changes to our brain by the choices we're making. We can change, the automatic thoughts that we have. And automatic thoughts are a lot of those negative self-talk things that we just kind of flow into. We don't mean to, we don't even think about it, but we just see, we see somebody, give us a funny look at work, and we have this automatic thought of, oh, well, they don't like me anyway, or they probably think I'm not doing enough. And those automatic thoughts are there, and they become automatic just because they're a bad habit, because our brain just does them over and over and over, and the little pathways connecting those actions and thoughts become automated. But we can change that. We can stop that. We can become more conscious of it, and then we can change what those messages are and how we talk to ourselves about that. Cultivating a growth mindset is an important part of building resilience. Again, I can't see those two things sort of untangling because I just feel like they're so interconnected. If we've got that growth mindset, that opens us up to building more resilience. With a fixed mindset, it's really hard. This idea that neuroplasticity means that we can increase our neural growth by the actions we take. Again, you can tell this part excites me. I love knowing that there are things that I can do in terms of how I think, what I say to myself, what actions I take. Do I do gratitude practice? Do I journal? Do I exercise? What other things am I doing that's giving me this positive feedback? It's changing my brain, it's changing the connections, and it changes the structure in there. And the fact that cognitive behavioral therapy, which is what we provide, can provide tools to work on this. And so, I say these things and it seems, in some ways so clear and so simple, but I also know how hard it is to go from, okay, that's a great idea, to like, how do I actually do that? How do I get in the space when I'm dealing with an aging parent and I'm worried about what's going on there? Or I'm in the midst of a divorce and I'm not sure how to get through this. And this sounds great, but I don't quite know how to make it sort of come to life in my world. That's a place where it may be helpful to talk to somebody. It may be helpful to have a counselor that you talk with. Some folks get really interested in this, and there are so many great books and, oh my gosh, web resources. There's just so much good stuff out there about these topics. They're really hot, kind of popular topics right now. So there's plenty to find if you're interested. But if it feels like, no, I think I need to sit down and talk about this a little bit and sort of figure out, how do I do this? How do I build this game plan? Essentially, how do I build my pilot project out? That's a time where you might want to come talk to somebody like me. So that leads me right to, let's see how we're doing on time. I think we're in good shape. So in the Office of Work Life, we have Work-Life Connections. And that program is me and my great colleague, Ann Bissoni. Some of you probably know her. She has been around campus for 10 years now. She just had her 10-year anniversary. And we provide individual counseling to folks on campus. And so for any UK employees, when I keep saying on campus, we're based here on main campus, but we provide services to folks. We can do remote counseling as well. So because we know we've got folks out in the field and throughout all of Kentucky. So everyone who is a UK employee, they're sponsored dependent, or a retiree, is able to take advantage of our services. We offer 5 free counseling sessions a year that renews each July 1st, so every fiscal year those are available. This is confidential. And I always like to kind of break this part down a little bit more. This does not go in personnel records or connect to health records on campus. Our files are in a whole separate system, and we're kind of walled off for privacy in that way. So it truly is comparable to seeing somebody just out in the community. We have folks that come in and they're talking about work-related issues. Some are coming in talking about home issues, health issues. Some folks may be working with one of the health coaches or doing some other things on campus and deciding that this might be a piece that could support that as well. We don't do couples counseling. We can make referrals for that, but we do see children, adults, again, folks in the retirement age range as well. We also have different groups and events around campus, so you may see us, we've got a self-care series we're doing this year that is the 3rd Thursday of the month called Imagine You, and it's really tying together creativity and working through some of these things. It all ties to resiliency. And so if you're interested in that, you can certainly go to our website. I'll have that up in the next slide. We also do things like speed friending or different outreach events kind of throughout the year. But our focus is employees. And so that's one thing that makes us a little bit different, than folks that are working with our student population. We know how important that is. But we also know that to work with that student population and the demands that are there, we need to take care of our employees because you guys are out there doing that frontline work. So anyway, we are located in Breckenridge Hall. There's a picture of that. We're tucked away a little bit over there. And let's see, there is my contact information. You're free, feel free to email me if you need information. That's our website as well. So if you want to go and see what kinds of things we have coming up, feel free to check that out. And then let's see. That is our next presentation that's coming up in the series, so Awakening Your Inner Nurturer with Jackie. And if you guys have not seen Jackie, she's fantastic. So I would encourage you to take advantage of that one. All right, so on that note, I'm done with the slides. I'm going to actually go back to my contact slide just in case anybody needs that. And then I'm going to try to interact now with the chat box. So let's see if I can do this. And feel free, if you haven't already put questions in, or if you have questions or comments, feel free to add them in there, and I'm going to catch up with what you guys have been typing. Okay, looks like, yeah, Jacob had talked about the fact somebody was asking if this will be available later. He's talked about the fact that, yes, it'll be up on their YouTube page. Let's see. When you say 5 free sessions, is the total for the employee and sponsor dependents, or does the employee get 5 and each dependent get 5? Great question. It is 5 total by employee. So I'll give you a couple of examples because that sounds simple, but sometimes it gets a little complicated. So for employee themselves, or they can give those to the sponsor dependent to use. Sometimes we have 2 folks who work at UK and they may want a child to get services. And if that's the case, then essentially that person would have 10 from 2 different parents. So it really is depending on how you want to split that up. So, brief therapy, we're not going to, 5 sessions, we're not going to cover everything in the world. For some folks, it's enough to kind of jumpstart a decision they're making or something they're working on. Some folks use those 5 sort of throughout the year. They do 2 in the fall and 2 in the spring and 1 in the summer. They use it as kind of an accountability time for some of these bigger things they're working on. But if we get together and, because we're going to work with you to decide what's going to be the best plan, some folks need ongoing. They need something that's a little more frequent or a little more consistent, and we can help you sort of navigate which insurance you have and who's going to, sort of where's the best referral option for you and things like that, and then how to do that. So usually we're a little quicker to get into than some of those long-term options, but anyway, we want to be sure that you end up at the best place for what you need. Let's see. I think it's important to underscore the physical changes that occur in the brain and body as a result of appropriate therapies and good mental health exercises. People feel better because their brains and bodies are changed by their mental exercises. Absolutely. It is, I just am so fascinated by it because to me, I think maybe this is partially because I've been in this field for a long time. I just feel like there were points where it was that fixed mindset idea was so much more common, and it was either you're going to take medication, and medication has a place and can be a great fit for lots of folks for lots of reasons. But sometimes it would feel like that's the only sort of option you had. And once we've seen more and more of that research showing what talk therapy does, and not just the talk therapy, but other changes that you're making as well, things that don't involve medical intervention, when we would see the changes that makes in our brain, and then how our body changes. When we do a lot of, I'm going to use this example because I think we're good for the last minute or two. One of the things we talk with folks a whole lot about is using deep breathing as a way of managing sort of their stress and anxiety. And I think people hear that from us, and it sounds so tiny. It's like, yeah, I'll take a deep breath, we'll all feel great. But they don't necessarily really kind of get what's going on physiologically. So we'll spend time talking with folks about why does that actually work? Like what's happening in your body when you slow down and you do consistent, intentional deep breathing. Well, it's changing what systems you're engaging. It's changing production of cortisol. It's changing adrenaline that's going through your body. That just by those actions, we change physiologically what's happening. If I can do the deep breathing and calm down that nervous system a little bit, then I can think more clearly. Then I can engage other parts of my brain to problem solve. But if we're so sort of flared up in that moment, it's really hard to do that when our body is producing all of these chemicals and we're having the racing heart and we're having headache and muscle tension. It's really hard to think and to sort of be our best self. So what we've got to do is calm that body piece down a little bit so that we can think. All right. Let's see. We've got a comment. I can recommend the work of Dr. Judson Brewer. He has an app titled Unwind. Oh, that's good to know. I'm always looking for a good app. He has lectured at the UK Medical Center, and his work is fascinating. It shows these brain changes. Awesome. Thank you for adding that one in there. There's so much good stuff out there being done. And again, I feel like these are really, that resiliency, growth mindset, those are just such hot topics. And I know we are seeing more of that across the field, more people talking about that and how to sort of integrate all these parts that we know into a package that works for the folks that we're serving. So that's a great suggestion. Our hours, we have a slight bit of flexibility. Anne tends to have some earlier appointments available. So depending on sort of what her schedule is, sometimes she would have an appointment as early as 7 or 8 in the morning. I do some later appointments. So my latest appointment in the day is 5:15, and that's not every day, but it's on a set schedule. And so yeah, you can kind of go in and see what works for you. We try to stagger our times so that both of us are available. Like I do a late lunch, so I can always do a noon appointment. I think every day I've got a noon appointment, which works really well for a lot of folks. Anne's schedule's a little bit different, so we try to make it as broad as possible. And here's some really exciting news. We are getting ready to hire 2 new therapists. And so we're going to have 4 of us in the near future. So I'm hoping that being able to get in is going to be a lot quicker, and we're going to be able to have even more variety of when we're able to do things. And let's see what else. I've got hours. I like Dr. Wheel's breathing exercise, especially the relaxing breath. Oh my gosh, there's so many good breathing exercises out there. And I will admit, and I tell my clients this all the time, like I'm the first one who wants to be like, okay, I took 2 breaths. I got to go. We've got stuff to do. I don't have time to sit here and breathe. But that's not what we need to do. We need to slow it down. We need to stop for 2 or 3 minutes. We need to do it long enough to let our body catch up and sort of get that benefit from it. And I guarantee you, you will be more productive. You'll be able to focus better. You will be more relaxed. I mean, all those benefits will come. It is worth that investment. If we step back and look at any other part of our day and said, okay, if I can get you to twice a day, give yourself 3 minutes to do something that's going to take care of you, would that seem like it's worth the effort? Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Thank you for everything. And I appreciate you all tuning in for us. If there's ever something about this you need to know or are interested in, feel free. Email me, call, set up an appointment if you want to work through some stuff. There's nothing Ann and I love more than get to meet with folks from around campus. So come meet with us if that can be helpful for you in your journey. Thanks.